The EP Podcast. Heard everywhere podcasts can be found, and always at theeppodcast.com.
March 30th, 1981. I had to look it up. I was 4 years old. That is the last time a sitting or former president of the United States of America was wounded in an assassination attempt. And the only reason I bring it up, and the only reason I was thinking about it this week, is that Secret Service agent Tim McCarthy grew up on my block. And at 4 years old, his mother was still there, and it was a media circus up and down Spalding Avenue between 80th and 81st Street. He lived right on the corner of 80th and Spalding, and he took a bullet for Ronald Reagan. And I had not thought about that memory until this week. Now, I get into all of this, but this is a local show. This is the EP Podcast, so instead, we're going to take 30 minutes and talk local. A story that only matters to Evergreen Park and some of Beverly, let's be honest. The water boil order last week. We're bringing in the expert, the number one person you would want to talk to find out everything about your drinking water and what happened. The complete lowdown here in moments on the EP Podcast and our monthly Health Corner check-in with OSF Little Company of Mary. We're talking with a wound care specialist about a very unique clinic available to you here in the EP. This episode and every episode of the EP Podcast brought to you proudly by the First National Bank of Evergreen Park. Located in that iconic building at 95th and Pulaski, you get free ATMs nationwide. Any fee charged, they're going to put the money back in. There are no overdraft charges, so you never have to panic because guess what? We all make mistakes. The online banking tools are superb. And when you're like me and you got 3 kids and you're taking care of their accounts and yours, one's on their way to college, another one just a young kid trying to figure out what it means to save a dollar. We're all linked up. Everybody's getting statements. I'm able to transfer things quickly. I do my business banking there as well. You should check them out. First National Bank of Evergreen Park, corner of 95th and Pulaski, member FDIC. Sitting down here at the 9-foot homemade oak bar, we have Mike Ward. He's with Evergreen Park Public Works Water Management, and he's the perfect guy to bring in here because there was a hubbub just recently about a boil order in the EP. How are you, Mike?
Good. How are you, Chris?
I'm good. I appreciate you stopping by and talking with me.
Yeah, no problem.
So I kind of got this because I think you and I had a conversation once. You came over here and tested my water, which was like a random test. You do that from time to time. You'll stop by houses and you'll be like, hey, we're just making sure everything's going well and doing the individual houses. Is that how often do you do that?
Well, I sample every week, required by the EPA. And those are routine samples. What I did here was come over after a water main break on 99th Street.
That's right. I remember that now. You came in and you were like, I just want to double check a couple of houses individually. You were getting good readings like overall.
Yes.
But you were like, just a precaution. I want to make sure everything's okay.
Yeah. Just to take a special sample, additional sample during my weekly sampling. If there's a main break and it's bad enough where they have to throttle down valves, I'll try to take a sample between the distance that the valves were turned down. So in this case, it would have been like half a block on 99th Street. Probably from Turner, actually may have been the block, without looking at our atlases, Spalding to Holman.
Yeah.
So this length of water main, in between those valves, I would have wanted to take just a precautionary sample.
It felt like you had sampled and done what you were supposed to do, and you were doing extra work when you stopped by. That's what it felt like. I mean, I remember you left, and I said out loud, I was like, I felt like he had already done what he was required to do, and he just wanted to be sure, so he was doing extra for some of the residents.
Right. We just try to go out just if there's a main break, and we just want to sample. Just to be certain that there aren't any issues.
I like that. I'm gonna be honest with you. I'd be worried if you just did the minimum.
Yeah.
And it's my water, for crying out loud.
That's right.
I'm one of those people that I'm a tap water kid. I'm a child
Me
of the
as well.
80s. I grew up in Chicago nearby Evergreen Park. I've been here now for 18 years. And I'm a tap water family. We don't keep a lot of bottled water around. I keep it for the guests
Same way.
sometimes. But I drink the tap water. We use the tap water to boil, to cook food with. So it's important to me that I feel like it's safe. Now, Chicago provides to Evergreen Park, correct?
That is right.
Okay,
yes.
so Evergreen essentially is paying Chicago to bring the water in. I'm sure that comes out of our property taxes or some kind of bill somewhere. It might actually be, if I'm not mistaken, I get a water bill every 3 months, right?
That's correct, yes.
That's what I'm getting. Okay. So, and then we're kind of beholden to what they're charging the village, right? I mean, it's kind of like they look at us and say, hey, we have all the water. This is what we're charging you.
Yeah. They do all the treatment. What I do is just add additional chlorine, after the water.
So there's a little extra that Evergreen Park
Yeah.
gets. What is the purpose of that? Because I hear chlorine and I think to myself, well, I put a lot of chlorine in my pool, but I wouldn't drink it.
Right. It's a disinfectant. Just kills bacteria that may be present in the water. So Chicago does all the treating, adds fluoride and does all the... You go on Chicago Water Management's website and you can see what the comprehensive chemical analysis is that the Chicago Water Management does on the water. If you're interested in that, and even chromium-6 is another, problem chemical that is people are concerned with.
Showing up in water. I want to get into that in a second. Let's get to the boil order thing, though, first, because I know people are curious about that. So you correct me if I'm wrong. Evergreen Park's getting their water from Chicago, but it doesn't all come through one singular pipe. It's being fed. Different areas are getting it fed from different pumping stations in Chicago, correct?
That is right.
All right. So there is that one section is to the east of Evergreen Park, okay, right up against Beverly. And that boil order was mostly Chicago and a very small strip, very important strip still, of Evergreen Park. But that's coming off of one station. And I remember a few years ago, there was a problem with water pressure from that Chicago station. And because the water wasn't pressurized enough, there was a chance that contaminants could get in. And that's why there was the boil order a few years ago there. Is this the same thing?
Yes. It just, whatever happened with the city at the Roseland pumping station caused pressure to drop enough to where Chicago Water Management, consulting with the Illinois EPA, thought it would be a good idea to just issue that boil order for the areas affected, which were Beverly, Morgan Park, and Auburn Gresham. The reason that those few houses on California were included in that boil order is for whatever reason they get their water directly from the city of Chicago and not Evergreen Park's water distribution system.
Okay.
So they may get a bill from Evergreen Park, which is your garbage pickup. But I think as far as water and also their sewer charges are from Chicago. So for whatever reason, those homes in Evergreen Park.
How the pipes were made. The pipes were not made exactly with the borders.
Yeah, just on that stretch, their water comes from the city of Chicago. So those few homes in Evergreen Park were affected by the boil order.
So explain the pressure thing to me, because I had somebody ask me about it.
Sure.
Because I was trying to tell somebody, I was like, I think this is because of pressure coming out of a station. It's over there, because I remember that from a couple of years ago. And they're like, well, why does pressure make a difference? And I was like, I don't know. Like if the water slows down, more stuff comes out of the pipes. Like I couldn't figure it out.
Yeah, I think when a pipe becomes unpressurized, contaminants can then enter the pipe from the ground. When a pipe is pressurized, if there's a break in the pipe, water
moves so fast it's not getting through the crack and getting it.
It's escaping the pipe, not allowing anything into the pipe as long as the pipe is pressurized.
Oh, so here I'm getting this now. So I'm picturing, let's say we have a stretch of pipe. It's an old pipe. It's been under there forever, because you have to think about the infrastructure of this entire city is old. I just had the pipes in my house redone. We had a leak where what happened was the drain pipe underneath the kitchen sink broke, and so when you were running water in there, it was dripping into the basement. So then I had a plumber come over, and as he removes that pipe, another section of pipe in the house just falls.
No.
And he's like, oh no, it's not connected anymore, because the pipes in the house are so old that the rust, like where everything's screwed in, it's all come loose, and there's these cracks and there's these openings. So he redid the whole thing with PVC pipe. He's like, I've already got to open up your wall in 2 places. Do you want me to finish this? And I'm like, yes, just finish it. So we did the whole thing, and now it's all redone in there. But he's like, this is going to happen to all these houses, and this is what's going on underneath the ground. So what you're describing is there's a possibility that some of the pipes that are part of the infrastructure, either in Chicago or moving in Evergreen Park, may eventually have wear and tear, and you'll have these cracks. If there's so much pressure, water's going out, so contaminants can't get in. When the pressure drops, now all of a sudden the contaminants can get in through the cracks.
That's I guess, a good layman's explanation.
That's a podcaster's explanation.
Yeah, no, that sounds great. It sounds great to me. Yeah.
Yeah, like, works for me.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I guess in the end, when this is identified, like, people are always like, well, did we get notified quick enough? It sounds to me like this is something where it's impossible to know immediately when it's happening. It's something that Chicago's seeing it. We have to rely on Chicago identifying it. Then they're checking with the Illinois EPA. Then they're issuing an order. Then you guys have to catch that the order's out there and it covers those, because sometimes I wonder whether or not they even communicate it directly to you, or if you're finding out because you get the same alert the rest of us got. Like, my iPhone went off.
Yeah, I did get those alerts. I think I was in the office or in the pumping room when my phone alerted me to this boil order that I already knew was happening.
Yeah. And so, but it also sounds like they issue that because they're like, there may be a problem. Not exactly there is a problem.
That's right.
They get close to it.
You want to make sure that, that what they said, just be cautious. Abundance of caution. I'm not a big fan of that term, but I understand why people use it, just to alert people that there may be an issue and to boil your water. And
Evergreen does treat the majority of the village, but that little section doesn't go through our pumping.
I think it's
that's a Chicago. It's essentially you're getting Chicago water. If you're in that section, you're not getting it passed through Evergreen and then out to the rest of the village.
Yeah, or directly from the city of Chicago and that Roseland pumping station.
So now here's what I want to ask you, and I'm very curious about this. I saw a comedian by the name of Jimmy Carr, who tells dirty jokes from time to time, but he was on a podcast, and he made this comment, which has stuck with me for the last 6 months, I think, since I heard it. And it was, there's 6 billion people in this world, and in total, there's been about 10 that have walked the face of the earth. And we are part, in this day and age, we are living better than any of those other billions of people ever lived. Because it doesn't matter if you're in a small trailer park in the middle of the country, your water's better, your food's better, your way of life is better, you get more heat, you have more protection from the elements, you have doctors that can cure things that they couldn't cure. We get upset because we see things on social media like, I don't have what that guy has. But in reality, we're all living better right now than people even 50 years ago were living, no matter where our social status is. And I thought that was a brilliant way to put it, because there's so much negativity in the world. But building upon that, the water is, in my mind, I would think, cleaner than it used to be. On the other hand, more chemicals have been introduced into the ground. You get people spraying with their weeds and stuff like that. You're a guy who evaluates water. What do you think about water quality right now compared to previous decades?
Well, just I grew up a block away from the Cal Sag in West Pullman, and water was always taboo. So maybe that's why I'm not the best swimmer. You wanted to stay away from water.
Didn't want to get in there.
But, no. But I think what the Water Reclamation District has done with those aerators, what is it, Harlem and along, and I think there's one in Blue Island, there's one out in Lamont, I think, where pump the water into a waterfall and let it cascade back into the Cal Sag, and it helps aerate the water. I know Mayor Daley, Sr., wanted to clean up the Chicago River to make it fishable at lunchtime. Not a big fisherman, but, I thought that was pretty cool of Mayor Daley, Sr., to want that for downtown workers to be able to go and throw a fishing rod into...
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah. One thing with the sampling I've done, it's the UCMR 5, and that's for forever chemicals. And UCMR stands for Unregulated Contaminant Monitoring Rule.
And that's that stuff that people spray on their weeds, right? Is that an easy way?
It's plastics, I think.
Plastics, okay.
Yeah, more. And so this was the fifth cycle of UCMR 5. And at least with Chicago, Lake Michigan water, no chemicals, no trace amounts of chemicals were found in the water. One explanation that I've heard, I don't know if it's true, is that the cribs in Lake Michigan are 2 miles out into Lake Michigan, and that is maybe helping.
That's protecting.
Yeah, you're not. I think some other communities, their intakes for Lake Michigan are closer to the shoreline. So whoever thought of building the infrastructure for the city of Chicago years ago, it was a brilliant idea to move the two cribs.
They put them further away, further out.
Yeah,
it kind of protects the water a little bit more.
Yeah.
And that is interesting to hear because I have a journalism degree, but I was a history minor, and I loved doing Chicago history and taking Chicago history classes. And it was as if some of the greatest engineering minds were thinking long term.
Sure.
Like, what will this place be like in 200 years? They were designing a lot of the infrastructure in the city, and there are still some amazing ways that Chicago's set up. So it's good to hear that the water is better. Like, I get that report from you guys. I don't want to keep you forever. So I'll finish up with this. We get this report every year in the mail. I can't read that thing. So I'm curious what you think of it. You're somebody who understands what all those numbers are when the annual water report comes out. Give it to me in the simplest terms in like 30 seconds. Like, water's good, water's not so good. Water compared to other areas, is it better here than other places?
I'm like you. I'm a tap water drinker. I rarely drink bottled water. I think Lake Michigan, the Great Lakes, we're fortunate to have that resource here. We're fortunate, the fresh water source. I love Lake Michigan water. I would prefer drinking that over anything that's in a bottle. I think even the city of Chicago water meets better requirements than
what's inside of a bottle.
What's inside of a plastic bottle.
What's inside of your stuff you're buying in the store.
Yeah.
I'm going to tell you something right now. That's probably more important to me than anything. I'm smiling right now. If the guy who's treating the water, who understands how the water works, says, I'd rather drink your tap water than the bottled water you bought in the store because I know what's in the tap water. Yeah. That makes me feel better.
Yes.
You made me feel good today. Yeah, you did. I was like, I want to talk about the boil order, and now you're walking out of here, and I'm like, whew. I'm happy with the tap water now. I feel smart because that's what I drink. Yeah. Mike Ward from Evergreen Park, Public Works, Water Management. Thanks so much for stopping by.
Yeah, no problem. If you want to do it again, we'll see how things go.
Cool.
In the future. Thank you, Chris.
Building relationships, supporting the community, and service. These are the things that Country Financial stands for. They're more than just an office you may pass by as you drive through Evergreen Park. They're neighbors who lend a helping hand and support the fabric of your community, including charitable organizations, sports, financial education, and civic organizations. And since Country is already your neighbor, they want to get together and chat. Call your local Country Financial representative, Mike Thauer, today at 708-425-1559 to talk about the things that are important to you and how he can help you protect them. It is now time for your EP podcast, Word on the Street, brought to you by Spoken Vine Wine Bar and Bottle Shop, northeast corner of 95th and Kedzie. A great establishment to go in, date night, get out with your friends, get away from your kids. It's 21 and over. Try one of the many wines they have from all over the world. The menu is ever changing. Get yourself a big old glass or get a flight, try a bunch. Try the food. It's incredible. See more at SpokenVineWines.com. The Evergreen Park Public Library is hosting a teen murder mystery party based on the book One of Us is Lying. Friday, August 9th, kicking off at 5 p.m. 6th grade through 12th grade, you have to register in advance. This is a murder mystery game with a twisted version and a new ending in case the kid has already read the book. Register online at evergreenparklibrary.org. This Thursday, check out the Farmers Market. Lots going on there. It's every Thursday, 8 a.m. until 1 p.m. at 89th and Kedzie Yukich Field here in the EP, but they're also adding a shredding event here on July the 18th. 2 box maximum, but everything from your tax returns to bank statements, canceled checks, personal documents, pictures, just 2 boxes. Just bring them over and have them shredded. Get them out of your home. 9 a.m. until 11 a.m. during the farmers market. And you can also meet the village this Thursday. The folks that run things are going to be out there saying hi and answering questions, including Mayor Kelly Burke and Village Clerk Kelly Duffy. I know they are scheduled specifically between 10 a.m. and noon. And there's sidewalk chalk for all the kids, 10 a.m. until noon at the farmers market this Thursday as well. They're adding kid activities to the market. I would worry about the weather, but it just feels like the big giant storm comes at night, and then during the day it's beautiful out. Definitely not a simulation. I mentioned last week on the EP podcast that I saw a lot of crazy videos, especially after the 4th of July weekend, people doing stupid things and injuring themselves, and I thought to myself, well, we need to have an expert on to talk about what to do when you have an injury, a wound, let's say. You've hurt yourself, possibly doing something dumb. And if you're in Evergreen Park, there is a wound care facility that is here. It's part of Little Company of Mary Hospital. And from that facility, Dr. Igor Altman joins me right now. How are you, Doc?
Oh, I'm doing great. Thank you, Chris.
So I didn't know that you had this. So first of all, just so I get it as we're talking about this, Little Company of Mary has a specific, what is this, like outpatient? It's like is it like an urgent care?
No, it is not an urgent care center. It's not even like an urgent care center. We don't see people urgently, but we do treat wounds that have been there for a while and have been previously seen by urgent care centers or emergency rooms. So if somebody hurt themselves and was seen by emergency room or an urgent care center, then a further follow-up can be done at our clinic, and then we'll definitely take care of the healing process.
Okay, so this is interesting. I have a 9-year-old that when he was, I want to say, 5 or 6 years old, went up to the park and his sister walked him up there. She's about to go off to college. So she's a teenager at the time. You know, she had taken some babysitting classes and she's like, I'm going to take him up to the park for a couple of hours. And they're up at Klein Park and he falls and hits his head off of a metal step. And he opened up a big gash in his head. I mean, I remember when she called me from her cell phone, she was like, I need help right now. And somebody had called an ambulance. He had a big, giant gash over his eye. And when I got a look at him as he was on his way to the hospital, it almost felt like I could see his skull. Like, that's how bad it was. And he's okay. And they took care of him. And she knew in the immediate moment to apply pressure. You know, she kept her head throughout the entire thing. Now, afterwards, after they've taken a look at him, we would go then to your facility if we wanted to follow up because we want to make sure that heals properly, correct?
Exactly right. So because the initial response to an injury like that would need to be some imaging studies and neurological exam to make sure that there's no concussion and there's no fracture. Also, if it's a huge gaping wound, it may need to be sutured together. Something that can be done in the emergency room. And the emergency room also has a capability of consulting different specialties to assess the wound and provide urgent care. And then afterwards, certainly then we can see the patient, we can take care of the aftermath and guide the patients with their healing process, yes.
Is the main thing you're working on the idea of we want to prevent scarring, we want to prevent infection?
In terms of preventing scarring, it's a loaded question. We unfortunately not always it is as feasible as it seems. Scarring will form one way or the other, but definitely control the infection, control the drainage, control the smell, control the pain, and then provide guidance. Now, this type of wound that you mentioned is a traumatic, emergent situation that some people get into, but there are many other wounds that we treat, and we can definitely discuss that as well.
Yeah, give me a couple of examples. Like, what are you seeing the most?
Well, this time of the year, fortunately and unfortunately, is really no different from any other type of the year. Burn injuries, for example, we do not treat much of because we are not a certified burn center. Those patients would need to go to places like Loyola or Cook County Hospital where they do have dedicated burn centers. We do treat minor burns, but then we assess those as well, and then depending on our comfort level as well as the benefit of a patient, we then defer it to either we treat it or we defer it to a burn centers. But the other ones that we treat, and it's pretty much everyday thing, is diabetic foot ulcers. We treat venous leg ulcers. In fact, venous leg ulcers are the most common ulcer on the leg in the community. We treat pressure injuries, people that are immobilized, paralyzed, and develop those pressure injuries on their bony prominences. Things like atypical wounds like vasculitis, calciphylaxis, cancerous lesions, things that don't really heal and need some assistance with their management. Lymphedema or swelling legs. Those are the types of wounds we see pretty much every day.
So how do you go about this process? Because I find this interesting. Like essentially, as I'm following along with this, and I'm sure all the listeners are as well, if you hurt yourself, go to the emergency room. Like first you go and you take care of it. And I would assume you would say you're bleeding, you apply pressure. I'm sure that there's advice you give for burns and different things in the immediate while they're getting themselves to the proper caregivers. And then what you have is after it's all said and done, or if you have other injuries that aren't as immediate as those traumatic injuries, you have people that have these issues and they come into you and you're spending time just making sure it's clean and that they're maintaining it right. Is it a lot of trying to remind people to be a good patient? Like I've done physical therapy before, and I know the biggest problem with me is remembering to do my exercises at home. Is it a lot of you saying, okay, we're going to fix this, and then when you go home, do better? Is that a lot of it?
Well, a lot of it is counseling. You're absolutely right. Compliant care is what we really ask the patients to do. When we say change the dressings twice a day, we mean it. When we tell patients don't quit smoking, we mean it. When we tell patients, okay, how about we improve some hydration and nutrition, add some extra protein with every meal, take some vitamins, multivitamins, vitamin C. There are many other things that could be added to promote healing. And not only did we educate patients, but we also educate their caregivers, whether it's family members or nursing staff that comes to their places to assist with wound care needs. So wound care is a very dynamic field. And so when we see people for the first time, we may decide to use a certain type of dressings and certain wound care modalities. But then as the healing process goes on, we then, modify our wound care approach, as necessary.
You mentioned vitamins. You mentioned eating different kinds of foods. You mentioned stop smoking. So the body is an amazing thing, which and it has healing properties. But what you're saying is the healthier you are, and the more fuel you're giving the body and taking out some of the things that may be harming the body, you have a better chance of healing. Am I getting that right? Is the smoking thing also because like the smoke in the air could make it harder for it to heal, or is that just another part of trying to keep them healthy?
No, smoking has been shown to slow down the healing, not only the first-hand smoking, but also a second-hand smoking. So not only the patients would benefit from quitting, but also smoking cessation of their partners is very important. It has been shown that one cigarette can slow down the blood flow to the affected area anywhere between 20 minutes to 2 hours. So if somebody is down to 5 cigarettes a day, potentially they can limit the amount of blood flow coming to the healing area for 10 hours a day. So in our eyes, it's either all or none. People a lot of times will come and say, Doc, I'm so good, I'm down to cigarettes a day. Well, that's great, but we want this out completely, not only for the healing process. Certainly during the healing process, it's very crucial, but also long term. There's really no benefit to smoking whatsoever.
Now, as you mentioned earlier, your facility and what you're specializing in is dealing with people as after the initial thing, after the initial injury, illness, whatever caused the wound, you're helping them maintain, do the right things, heal properly, which is all wonderful. I think that's great. I never even was aware of something like this. I figured they wrap you up, they give you some instructions, you go home, and you try not to get the wound wet, and you hope for the best. That's how I always felt that it went. So I love the fact that Little Company of Mary has this here in Evergreen Park.
The other thing that I wanted to mention here is not only that we provide wound care with the wound care modalities, but also we have 2 HBO chambers in the clinic that are utilized for treatment of various FDA-approved indications. For example, diabetic foot ulcers. We treat failed flaps and skin grafts. We treat radiation-induced hemorrhagic cystitis, where people had, let's say, prostate cancer and required radiation therapy, and then years later develop bleeding in their bladder and then see blood in their urine. So HBO therapy or hyperbaric oxygen therapy is used to treat that. We also treat other indications in the chambers, such as acute arterial insufficiency, traumatic wounds that you mentioned. Some of those wounds, car accidents, may cause arterial insufficiency or interrupted blood flow to certain areas of the body, and so HBO therapy is indicated for that as well. So, I welcome clinicians, their referrals, as well as patients themselves to visit our site at Little Company of Mary. All of that is described there.
Are there any tips you can give somebody before they get to you in those initial moments when there is an injury or a burn or some kind of wound where they're trying to consider to themselves, is this worth going to the hospital, or what can I do to help the person that's hurt? Do you have any kind of tips? Is it just stay calm and call 911, or is there something else they can be doing?
Well, it really depends on on what caused the wound and how bad the wound is. But certainly, initial steps when trauma happens, it would be control the bleeding, meaning that put pressure on that area, and the pressure needs to be held 10 to 15 minutes. I'll tell you from my experience in the hospital, when there's something is bleeding, you put pressure on it, and then you hold it for 1 minute, and it seems like you've been there for 30 minutes already. So it's crucial to actually time yourself. When you put pressure on a bleeding spot, look at the watch, look at the clock, and make sure that you are holding that pressure for 10, 15 minutes. Make sure that you also elevate that area so it's above the heart level if possible. You can also try to apply ice over that area, because ice vasoconstricts and limit the amount of blood flow to the area at that point, because you're trying to stop the bleeding. Sometimes, people with varicose veins, that's something that we see frequently. Those varicose veins tend to be very fragile, especially when with increased temperature. For example, somebody's taking a shower and the water is hot and they're scrubbing their legs. Very bulging, protruding vein may spontaneously rupture and bleed. And those bleed a lot, to the point where the bathroom and the area looks like a crime scene. It definitely freaks people out. It's not something that people are used to be seeing, and so they invariably call 911. But in reality, what needs to be done again is put pressure on that spot, elevate the leg, and then just let the bleeding stop. It will stop. And then definitely see one of us, and then we can then guide them through, because there are certain tests that may need to be done, like venous reflex ultrasounds. We need to check arterial flow. making sure that the blood flow is coming down to that area. Also designed the plant for proper compression therapy, referrals to different specialties like vascular surgery, lymphedema clinic. Not only that we provide care ourselves, but we also triage people through the appropriate channels in the medical realm.
Dr. Igor Altman, he's an associate professor of clinical surgery and family medicine. He is part of this wound healing tissue repair, this great facility that is open during the week over at Little Company of Mary, OSF Little Company of Mary here in Evergreen Park. And I'm sure he avoids all of the videos that pop up in my social media of people accidentally blowing themselves up because he's seen enough of it. Right, Doc?
Quite a bit, yes.
Thank you so much, Doc, and thank you for all you do.
Thank you, Chris.
It's the EP Podcast, all things Evergreen Park. It's the EP Podcast, Evergreen Park.